In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Giver of life. So today we continue our journey with the Gospel of John through Lent. Isn't he leading us on a merry dance? Providing us with Gospel accounts populated by characters that each week stand in stark contrast to the characters of the week before. Last week we met Nicodemus. Nicodemus came to speak to Jesus at night. A man with power. He was educated, a Pharisee, a religious leader and teacher, a complete insider in the Jewish world. He had no idea what Jesus was talking about for the most part last week. Today we meet the Samaritan woman. She never gets a name. She remains nameless. She meets Jesus in the noonday heat, not under cover of dark. Likely to be uneducated. She comes alone. The fact that she comes alone at noon, a woman, when no one else will be there, is because she is not part of a group. She's an outsider. She's an outcast in her community. And she's a Samaritan. There was much enmity between Samaritans and Jews in Jesus' time. And it is Jesus who initiates the conversation. At first, she has no idea what he's saying either. But by the end of the story, she's gathering her neighbours to hear him. He cannot be the Messiah, can he? Made me smile at this great, long, extended gospel we had today with its evident contrast to last week. And of course, one follows the other. Between the two, they seem to upend any assumptions that we might have of who actually has stature in this world. Today's gospel is loaded with all sorts of significance in terms of gender, political, and religious taboos being breached. Between this Jewish Jesus and the Samaritan woman, married 5 times and living in sin, or maybe in love, with her not husband. We could explore with great interest such topics, but what really captures my attention is the complete miscommunication. It reminded me of those conversations I used to have with my very concrete thinking son. I would try to explain an idea or a concept using a theoretical example, only to find that he would latch on to the example and explain in return the logistical improbability of that happening, or seek to clarify exactly what sort of cow or car or house we were talking about, whatever the concrete example was, as to whether it was even likely. Of course, in the process, the whole idea being explained got lost, and the conversation completely sidetracked, which could also have been part of the reason. You see, I hear hints of this in the conversation that happens between the Samaritan woman and Jesus. They do appear to be talking past each other. The Samaritan woman takes Jesus' words and seems to interpret them quite literally, looking to the practical, the improbability of Jesus getting water without a bucket. I mean, what nonsense. The desirability of the scenario of never having to be thirsty or having to come to draw water again. In turn, Jesus continues his train of thought or thinking or teaching, oblivious, it seems to me as a reader, to the woman's incomprehension. But somehow the conversation hangs together because there's enough threads of commonality between them for links to be made. I find the woman's testimony also rather curious. She says Jesus told her everything she's ever done. I'm not quite sure how, but evidently their conversation has caused her what you might describe as the relief of enlightened self-honesty, such that she wants others to share in it, such that this could make him the Messiah. Perhaps it is because Jesus sees her, literally sees her, and she knows her, and he meets her, all she's ever done. And what is more, he accepts her. She is made acceptable. Who she is made acceptable. She and all she is the means of knowing God and of God being known. Now, as you follow along when the disciples turn up, you would think, as Jesus continues to chatter on, that this time they'd get the connection. Surely the disciples are on the same wavelength. You'd think that, wouldn't you? But from the outset, they're singularly incurious. I'm not sure how we know that they're astonished that Jesus is speaking with a woman when we hear they're not sufficiently astonished to be bothered commenting on it. And then this Jesus' rather esoteric dialogue and discourse is met by concrete reality conversation that began with the Samaritan woman, that now keeps going with the disciples. When I consider today's gospel, I find myself a little disconcerted because the communication is so disjointed. I get frustrated because Jesus doesn't seem to be listening to those he's speaking to, and they don't seem able to hear him, or at least to understand what he's saying. So I'm not sure who to identify with, the Samaritan woman and the disciples, who are pretty concerned about the practicalities of eating and drinking and how to get on in real life, or Jesus, who's trying to communicate something deeper. It seems to me if you don't have your victuals sorted out, if you don't have your bread and your water and your place to sleep sorted out, you simply don't have the luxury of engaging in deeper meaning stuff. And then, because no one in the story seems to hear and comprehend Jesus' somewhat enigmatic discourse, even those disciples who are meant to be the in crowd and closest to the action, the inside running, if you like, on comprehension. Do you know what that means? The onus of responsibility to know what Jesus is saying and what it means falls to people like you and I. People who are listening or people who are reading. Because, of course, there's 2,000 odd years since then, so we've had lots of time to think about it or to read the words of those who've thought about it, lots of years to have worked it all out. We know it's significant because it's in our scriptures, right? And the words are uttered by Jesus, who is now revealed as the Son of God or the Messiah. So we can't dismiss this as a random rant. Rather, Jesus' words must be significant and full of meaning. So, well, that makes things easier, doesn't it? We all really understand what's going on, right? We're the ones who know, so meant to know, so of course we do. We're the discerning ones, with years since the account, to see the universal thread, the common wisdom, perhaps some salient warning. But I think this could be a trap. We either get it, the trap of either we get it or we don't. We either identify with the outsider Samaritan or the insider disciples. This is either about concrete things or it's about deeper meaning. But if we do that, I think we can get stuck. Food and water, thirst and hunger, eating and drinking, worship and mountains, prophets and testimony, belief and spoken word, double meaning and nuanced wordplay populate this text. Regardless of how or whether we comprehend Jesus' deeper meaning, we are left in no doubt that this living water, true worshipper, food that fully satisfies faith venture, is located in and concerned with the real life full of needs and confusion of you and me. Of course, we need to be concerned with the victuals, with the practicalities of life, with the concrete world in front of us. But where does it lead us if that is all we are concerned about? I cannot confidently declare, or probably even declare, that I know what Jesus' full meaning is in today's gospel. But maybe this gospel teaching can reassure us that being faithful doesn't mean we have to know it all, to get it, as was illustrated by Nicodemus last week. Maybe being faithful remains staying with the program, remaining present even if, as the words of wisdom from Jesus' mouth pour over us, even if most of them seem to keep on pouring past us. And of that discomforting notion that everything we've ever done is known by God. Well, if the Samaritan woman is anything to go by, it means that even so, despite everything that might reveal, in the eyes of God, all of who we are is acceptable and is accepted by God. And it is through and with all of that means and implies that we are the ones to make God known. We hear Jesus urge, look around. See, this world is the place of God's bounty and fruitfulness. Join God who is acting in the practicalities, in the concreteness of the world. And with all you bring, it is ours to contribute to the flourishing of this life in this world, for the life of this world.